I, Margaret Eleanor Blackwood, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath my primary residence at 1425 Maple Grove Lane, along with all associated property and investment accounts, to be divided equally among my grandchildren James, Victoria, and Elizabeth Blackwood. The lawyer's voice droned on as I sat in the back of the room, already knowing what was coming. My wealthy grandmother's death had brought the vultures circling, all eager for their share of the Blackwood fortune. As the only granddaughter who'd actually visited Grandma regularly instead of just showing up to ask for money, I knew I'd be treated differently in the will. And to my beloved granddaughter Katherine, I leave my antique store, Blackwood Treasures, including all inventory and associated records. The snickers from my cousins were immediate and poorly concealed. James actually turned around to smirk at me, his designer suit a stark contrast to my simple black dress. "Have fun with Grandma's junk shop, Kathy," Victoria stage whispered. "Maybe you can find a buyer who'll give you enough to cover the property taxes." I said nothing, remembering my last conversation with Grandma 3 weeks before she passed. She'd been sitting in her favorite chair in the antique shop, surrounded by what my cousins dismissed as worthless trinkets. "Katherine, dear," she'd said, her voice weak but her eyes sharp as ever, "promise me something. Promise you'll never sell the shop no matter what anyone offers you." "I promise, Grandma," I'd replied, holding her frail hand. "But why?" "Just remember," she'd interrupted, "real treasure isn't always what it appears to be. And the most valuable things are often hidden in plain sight." Now, watching my cousins divide up her mansion and millions, I wondered what she'd meant. The antique store had been her passion for 40 years, but it had never been particularly profitable. Most months it barely covered its own expenses. After the will reading, I stood alone in the shop, breathing in the familiar scent of old wood, leather, and history. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the Victorian windows. Every surface held memories. The massive oak desk where Grandma had taught me about different historical periods, the wall of leather-bound books she'd lovingly collected, the display cases filled with everything from Civil War medals to Art Deco jewelry. "Ready to admit defeat?" James's voice broke through my reverie. He stood in the doorway, managing to look both smug and concerned. "Look, Kathy, I know Grandma was eccentric, but this place is a money pit. I'll give you 50,000 for it right now. That's more than generous." I thought about Grandma's last words. About her insistence that I never sell. "No thank you, James." He frowned. "Don't be stubborn. This location could be worth something with the right development. But this." He gestured dismissively at the antiques. "This is worthless. You're not cut out for business." "Maybe not your kind of business," I replied quietly. "But I think I'll manage." After he left, I began the process of going through Grandma's records. The shop's office was a maze of old ledgers, handwritten notes, and carefully maintained inventory lists. Grandma had been meticulous about documenting every item's history and provenance. As I worked late into the night, something started to seem odd. The inventory lists mentioned pieces I'd never seen in the shop, yet they were marked as current stock. And there were regular notations about meetings with clients whose names never appeared in the sales records. "Meeting with LR regarding special collection," one note read. "Payment received, see vault records." Vault records? In all my years helping at the shop, I'd never known about any vault. I was about to close the ledger when a small key fell from between its pages. It was old, intricately designed, with a tag attached bearing a single word in Grandma's handwriting: "Remember." Remember what? I looked around the office, really looking now. The wall of books caught my eye. Specifically, a collection of leather-bound volumes about medieval European history that Grandma had always said were her favorites. Walking over, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. The books were arranged in a specific pattern, and one of them, "Hidden Treasures of the Medieval World," seemed to sit slightly prouder than the others. My heart pounding, I pulled the book. It moved like a lever, and with a soft click the entire bookshelf swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. "Oh my God," I whispered. The passage led to a small room I'd never known existed. Motion sensors activated soft lighting, revealing walls lined with steel safety deposit boxes. In the center stood a massive vault door that looked like it belonged in a bank. The key in my hand suddenly felt very heavy. It fit perfectly into the vault's lock. Inside, I found something that made me understand exactly why Grandma had made me promise never to sell. The worthless antique shop had been hiding something extraordinary, something that would change everything. Carefully arranged on steel shelves were dozens of items that didn't appear in any public inventory. Rare manuscripts, priceless artifacts, pieces that belonged in museums. Each had its own documentation, proving its authenticity and legal ownership. But it was the ledger on the vault's desk that truly stunned me. Opening it, I found records of Grandma's real business, one that made the antique shop look like nothing more than a carefully maintained front. For 40 years, Margaret Blackwood had been one of the world's most discreet and trusted dealers in rare antiquities, serving a select clientele of museums, private collectors, and even foreign governments. The worthless antique shop was just the public face of an empire worth millions. A letter addressed to me sat propped against an ancient Roman coin. "My dearest Katherine, if you're reading this, you found what I always knew you would. You were the only one who ever looked beyond the surface, who understood that value isn't always obvious at first glance. The others saw only dusty antiques and outdated decor. You saw stories, history, meaning. That's why you're reading this letter instead of James or Victoria. Everything in this vault is legally documented. My lawyer, Mr. Phillips, has all the necessary paperwork. He's been managing the legal side of this business for 30 years and will help you understand everything. But first, you need to know what's coming. James and Victoria won't stop at trying to buy the shop. Once they realize they've missed something, they'll try everything to gain control. Don't let them. I've spent 40 years building relationships with some of the most important collectors and institutions in the world. They trust the Blackwood name because we've always operated with discretion and integrity. You're ready for this, Katherine. You understand what's truly valuable, not just the artifacts but the history they represent and the stories they tell. All my love, Grandma. P.S. Check the small red book in the corner. I think you'll find tomorrow's meeting particularly interesting." With trembling hands, I found the book she'd mentioned. Inside was a note about a client meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, with the curator of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, interested in acquiring a recently discovered Renaissance manuscript. The manuscript itself sat in a climate-controlled case nearby, its estimated value making me dizzy. As I stood in that hidden room, surrounded by treasures that redefined my understanding of value, I heard James's words echo in my mind, "You're not cut out for business." I smiled, thinking of all the meetings Grandma had conducted in her worthless antique shop, quietly building an empire while others underestimated her. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Looking back at Grandma's letter, I noticed a line I'd missed before. "Peepees. The security cameras have already caught James trying to break into the shop tonight. The footage might be useful later." I checked the security feed on the vault's modern computer system. Sure enough, there was James attempting to pick the lock after hours. That's when I truly understood. Grandma hadn't just left me a business. She'd left me everything I needed to protect it. The antique shop's bell chimed distantly. Someone had entered despite the closed sign. Through the vault's security monitor, I saw Victoria wandering the shop floor, probably looking for anything valuable she could claim had sentimental value. Let her look, I thought. The real treasures were safe behind steel and stone, waiting for someone who understood their true worth. Just like Grandma had waited for someone who understood hers. The next morning, I arrived at the shop early to prepare for the Metropolitan Museum meeting. Victoria's Porsche was already parked outside, and I could see James's Mercedes pulling up behind it. Perfect timing. I straightened my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch, a gift she'd given me years ago that my cousins had always dismissed as a worthless reproduction, and waited. The shop's bell chimed as they entered together. Their matching expressions of false concern would have won them acting awards. "Kathy, darling," Victoria began, "we're worried about you. This shop, it's just not viable in today's market." "We've had the property assessed," James added, waving a folder. "The land alone is worth $2 million with the right rezoning. We can help you with that." I smiled, channeling Grandma's quiet confidence. "Actually, I've already had some interesting offers this morning." "Offers?" James scoffed. "From who?" The shop's bell chimed again. Dr. Eleanor Martinez, senior curator of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, walked in, followed by two assistants carrying archival cases. "Miss Blackwood." Dr. Martinez extended her hand. "I'm sorry I'm a bit early. Your grandmother always said punctuality was a mark of respect in our business." James and Victoria stared as I led Dr. Martinez to the shop's private consultation room, a space they'd always mocked as Grandma's pretend office. "We should discuss this as a family," James called after me. "Later," I replied. "I have an appointment now." Inside the consultation room, I retrieved the Renaissance manuscript from the vault using a hidden elevator system I'd discovered last night. Grandma had thought of everything. "Magnificent," Dr. Martinez breathed, examining the manuscript through archival gloves. "The provenance records?" I provided the comprehensive documentation Grandma had meticulously maintained. "As you can see, its ownership history is completely clean. My grandmother acquired it from the original family in 1987. Yes, I remember Margaret talking about this acquisition. She spent 3 years building trust with the family before they agreed to sell." Dr. Martinez looked up. She always said patience was the key to this business. After an hour of discussion, we reached an agreement. The Metropolitan Museum would acquire the manuscript for $4.2 million, maintaining the same discretion that had characterized their 30-year relationship with my grandmother. When I emerged from the consultation room, James and Victoria were still there, trying to look casual while obviously burning with curiosity. "What was that about?" Victoria demanded. "Just business," I replied. "The kind Grandma taught me while you were both too busy to visit her." "Now look here." James stepped forward, his face reddening. "We've been patient, but this is ridiculous. This shop isn't worth anything. We had it assessed." "You had the public showroom assessed," I corrected him. "The part Grandma wanted you to see." That stopped him short. "What are you talking about? Why don't we discuss it over dinner? Bring your lawyers. You'll need them after your failed break-in attempt last night." James went pale. Victoria's perfectly maintained facade cracked. "You're bluffing," she whispered. I pulled out my phone and played the security footage. Grandma believed in good security. She also believed in keeping evidence. They left quickly after that, already on their phones with their lawyers. But I knew this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I discovered the true scope of Grandma's empire. The antique shop was just one node in a network of relationships she'd built across the global art and antiquities market. Her reputation for discretion and authenticity had made Blackwood Treasures the go-to dealer for legitimate collectors and institutions worldwide. The public shop served multiple purposes: a cover for the real business, a way to spot potential clients, and most importantly, a test of character. How people treated what they thought was a humble antique store revealed everything about how they'd handle real treasures. My cousins predictably launched a legal challenge to the will. They claimed Grandma hadn't been of sound mind, that I had manipulated her, that the shop's true value had been concealed from them. But Grandma had prepared for that too. Mr. Phillips, her lawyer, presented years of documentation showing her careful evaluation of all her grandchildren. Notes about James's attempts to pressure her into selling the shop to his development company. Records of Victoria's complaints about the embarrassing store and her refusal to learn the business. And detailed observations of my own growing understanding of both antiques and people. "Your grandmother," Mr. Phillips told me after we won the court case, "was playing a very long game. She needed someone who understood that true value isn't always obvious, in objects or in people." The victory was comprehensive. James and Victoria were forced to pay damages for the break-in attempt and sign agreements preventing them from interfering with the business. But success brought its own challenges. Running an international antiquities business required more than just knowledge of history and art. It needed discretion, judgment, and an ability to read people as carefully as you read provenances. Gradually, I built my own reputation while maintaining Grandma's high standards. The public shop continued to operate, still serving as both cover and testing ground. I even hired James's daughter, who shared my love of history and had her grandmother's eye for hidden value, as an apprentice, proving that sometimes talent skips a generation. 1 year after Grandma's death, I sat in the consultation room with a client interested in a recently authenticated Van Gogh sketch. The client, a major museum curator, asked how I'd learned to handle such negotiations. I smiled, touching Grandma's watch. From someone who understood that real value isn't always what it appears to be. That evening after the shop closed, I visited the vault. Among the treasures and documentation, I discovered something else: Grandma's personal journals, chronicling 40 years of building her empire. One entry stood out. The greatest treasures aren't always the ones in vault. Sometimes they're the people others overlook, the potential others miss, the value others are too blind to see. Katherine understands this. That's why she'll take what I've built and make it even stronger. She'd been right, of course. The real inheritance wasn't the vault full of priceless artifacts or the network of international clients. It was the wisdom to see beyond surfaces, to understand that true worth often hides behind modest facades. James and Victoria had inherited the mansion and money, the obvious wealth. But I had inherited something far more valuable. A legacy built on understanding, patience, and the ability to recognize treasure in unexpected places. The shop's bell chimed softly. My last appointment of the day had arrived. A young collector who, like me, had learned that sometimes the most valuable things in life are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize their worth. As I went to greet them, I passed the wall of books concealing the vault's entrance. The spine of hidden treasures of the medieval world caught my eye, and I smiled, remembering Grandma's words. Real treasure isn't always what it appears to be. How right she'd been. The real treasure wasn't in the vault at all. It was in the lessons she'd taught me, the wisdom she'd shared, and the understanding that true value, whether in antiques or in people, often lies beneath the surface, waiting for someone patient enough to discover it. The young collector looked around the shop with genuine interest, not dismissal. Already I could tell they understood what James and Victoria never had, that sometimes the most precious things in life are the ones others are too blind to see. Just like Grandma had seen the potential in me when everyone else saw just another girl in a dusty antique shop. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all.